which means that in theory, YouTube is accepting the noises from my mouth. Gareth, it is a live episode tonight. Yes, Raphael, Daniel, hello, Mike C, everyone's here. Lachlan's here. Pineapple Man 3321 is here. Marvelous. Everyone, welcome. Hello, good evening. It's lovely to have you here. It's Rail Natter, of course. It's another Rail Natter. And this evening, we are... what are we doing this evening? Well, there's a couple of things we're doing. We are, most importantly, talking, though, about PLPR. You might be going, about what? We are talking about the Plain Line Pattern Recognition train. This train now, quite old. In fact, 20 years old, as Alex, who is waiting in the green room, is going to tell us after the credits roll, which is exciting. We're going to be talking about this. You might be going, we've not done a proper deep dive engineering episode for ages, and folks, do not be fooled. We are going to be doing those. We're going to deep dive. We're going to talk about details, track, technology, machine learning, an actual application of it, not AI bullshit. This is going to be really good, crunchy stuff that we haven't done for ages. I'm looking forward to getting into it with Alex. Alex Cusdin, our fine guest, who we'll introduce properly afterwards. Before we do that, of course, I should say, before I forget, is the good thing about this is it gives me an excuse to have me from 7 years ago again, because me from 7 years ago, this might be a little bit quiet, but me from 7 years ago went on this thing. In fact, that's when this photo was taken. So it's a chance for me from 7 years ago to tell us about what the experience was like while Alex and I talk about this with the benefit of hindsight. So me from 7 years ago, tell us something. Morning, everyone. Behind me, or just about to come past my shoulder, is one of Network Rail's plain line pattern recognition trains. Yeah, that's a little Class 67 pulling it along. I'm going to have a little bit of a ride around, and hopefully I'll be able to talk through a bit of what's happening on the train. Ow. Stay tuned. Anyway, well, before that scream deafens absolutely everyone involved, a quick reminder, everyone, that you can support Rail Natter and all the other bits and pieces I get up to at patreon.com/GarethDennis. Do that. Subscribe £5 and above, and you get many goodies, including a weekly bonus. Without further ado, everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. And as the Intercity 225 fades away... actually, let's get rid of my face, because I forgot to press this button, which will allow Alex to appear. My forehead is no longer you. Alex, hello. What a delight to have you along. In fact, before we talk about these lovely pictures of track, let's get our two faces next to each other. Alex, introduce yourself to the lovely listeners at home in a way that you would like to, and then we'll start talking about track.
Yeah, sure. Hi, folks. So, worked in the railway a long time now, nearly 19 years now. Started out as a Network Rail PWA apprentice, and then through PLPR went into projects, programs, change management. So yeah, excited to talk about this piece of engineering.
Yeah, and it's been a long time coming. It's something that quite a few people have asked. I've referred to PLPR quite a lot, and people every now and then in the chat, everyone's like, "What is that? Can you tell us about it, please?" And so that's exactly what we're going to be doing tonight. So we return to this picture of P-Way. Some lovely P-Way here. Well, two pictures of very similar things happening, other than the extreme lone working that we can see in the first photograph. So, Alex, what we're looking at here, what's going on in these pictures, and why is this relevant to framing our story tonight?
Yeah, so for PLPR, you kind of have to start with why does it exist? And it exists because of track inspection. So the black and white picture is, an early image of track inspection. So you have a guy in his helpful PPE of the age, nice and reflective. You can see his hammer over his shoulder for knocking the keys in on the bullet, and he is looking at the track or the road next to him, and looking for defects that he deems need immediate action, and anything that he needs to effectively tell the office about. So that's inspection.
And I've done this. I've done this for heritage railways. But lots of people still do this today. This is how heritage railways all have their inspection. Basic visual inspection. Yeah,
basic visual inspection, and then the image below is basic visual inspection. If you had noticed, we've added Technicolor, but we still have.
Yeah.
Now you have a lookout, so you've got a guy on the shoulder acting as a lookout, and then you've got a guy helpfully using his foot to kick something he's not happy with. It's a percussive test.
Feet are extremely good for this sort of thing. I kick stuff all the time when I'm walking along track, for sure.
The track is at ankle height, right? So if something looks a bit funny, kick it. If it makes the wrong noise,
genuinely,
you need to go and look at it, buyer. That's track inspection, and this was how it was when I started my career in 2007. So you've got to bear in mind that the guy at the top, the methodology has not really changed. The safe system of work had changed, but it's still Mark 1 human eyeball.
Yep. So did you start? Were you with a DU? Were you out?
Yeah. I was West Coast South at Bletchley. So,
wow. So
shout out to Bletchley.
Shout out to Bletchley. Now with a diamond crossing that's being that was a good idea, but seems to have been hammered very hard and not. I don't know. More on that on another episode. But shout out to Bletchley. Yeah, West Coast. That's a busy bit of railway right there.
It's a busy bit of railway. Boy. Yeah, you do your PTS test and it's 125 mile an hour. That wakes you up. Yeah, it wakes you up, and also the tonnages there mean that you're kept busy. Like that's a bit of railway that's some of the highest tonnages in Europe right there on that patch. So wowza, crikey. So basic visual inspection, and there are, as you have a more intensive railway, there's a couple of things. As you have a more intensive railway that is open more, track access becomes harder and harder. Yeah, really difficult.
Other factors, this is in the aftermath of us having had another track worker fatality very recently, middle of last month, devastatingly, kind of a painful reminder that we want people off track as much as we can. It's not that we want to get rid of skilled people. It's that as much as if we can genuinely replace tasks that repetitive tasks that are difficult to audit as well, difficult to have as repeatable because they depend on the what vibe the particular inspector is in, what mood they're in, how tired they are, what the lighting conditions are, how slurry covered the track is, XYZ, very non-repeatable, which is the last thing you want on linear infrastructure. As it gets busier and as you get less time to get out and maintain it, then something quite significant happened actually that then made all of those issues come into sharp focus, right? Which is Grayrigg.
This is Grayrigg, and this occurred obviously just as I was starting my career, and this occurred because the team that was supposed to be inspecting through this section had, for whatever reason, it's in the RAID report, and you can go find this yourselves. But when you complete an inspection, you sign off to say, mileage 10 to 20. I've walked through. I found these defects that need resolving, or I've resolved these myself because you might have taken a tool with you or some spares with you. And if you don't complete the inspection, you're supposed to say, you're supposed to phone the office. You're supposed to phone on-call manager and say, I'm cutting this short for these reasons. This is uninspected track. And it turns out that the team here were signing it as inspected and hadn't actually looked at it. So that is where we get into the repeatability part of this.
Yeah, it's down to a lot of there's a lot of potential for human error. In ways that are difficult to spot. They're not systemic errors. They are individual, random, human-based errors that are not a thing that you can spot, pick up, and respond to easily.
And with the gift of hindsight as well, I mean, we look at the derailment image here and we go, actually, we were incredibly fortunate that there was one life lost on this. When you look at the HST up in Stonehaven and you look at the Pendolino here, we were very fortunate that this was a new-ish train in 2007. This is probably some of the newer rolling stock with good rollover protection. You didn't get the carriages like collapsing into each other. So really, really fortunate here, and it was a bit of a wake-up call for the rail industry around track inspection. Yeah,
we're lots of things. There are several things in our favour here. We were going. The train was going into a curve, it was going into a left-hand curve rather than around a right-hand curve. So the forces, in a way, were favourable to decelerate the train more rapidly rather than it going out to the outside of the curve. but also, as you say, we talked about this for the Carmen episodes years ago, as you'll know, Alex, because you're watching them. The behavior of the Pendolino here, the performance of the Pendolino was absolutely outstanding, and really shows what then was modern, what today is actually not necessarily that modern, how capable that stock is. But yeah, a bit of a wake up call, right? Now, there is some interesting, I mean, excuse the pun, crossover with
there is,
tonight's sort of subject matter in a way with Grayrigg. Not just that there's an instigation into knowing that we're realizing that we need to do something differently, but also the actual story pattern recognition overlaps quite literally with Grayrigg. Yep. So if I bring up this picture, tell us a little bit about what that means and the kind of the introduction of pattern recognition and maybe a little bit about what that is materially as well.
Yeah, so the NMT there, the nice yellow, what do they call it, flying banana, I think is the acceptable kind of public name for it. There are other names. There are others. Was fitted with a French system, was in testing by Cybernetic, a company called Cybernetics, and it was called Ivoire. Apologies if you speak French. My French is awful. And that system was running and recording as the NMT ran over those points, and I appreciate this is plain line pattern recognition, but ran over those switches and crossings, and you could see the nuts lying next to the rail and the stretcher bar not in position, was captured in black and white, but was captured in an image by the NMT running over it before the derailment.
Yeah.
And it was like a couple of days before. Again, it's all on the report. It was a skin of the teeth kind of thing, but it kind of highlighted the whole, whoa, here are images of the track, and these images went into the Rabe investigation, went into the High Court and stuff like that. So yeah, this was a network rail going, we should look at this technology a lot more seriously. Yeah.
There's a couple of interesting things. Firstly, it's interesting, as people will see with pictures of the technology that is now used for PLPR. It's interesting comparing the quality, because this is much more washed out. It's less high resolution. It's interesting that this is the early emerging version of it. Before it got more high tech. Other people, Unclue on the YouTube chat is rightly pointing out that the NMT is not that new anymore. No, I think the NMT is the oldest part of the fleet. Only Mentor is older than this, and we don't use it anymore. So yeah, this thing is like the new measurement train is the oldest part of the Network Rail Yellow fleet, and because we're the railways, we love that. So I don't expect that's going to change anytime soon. We enjoy that. More on procurement of Yellow Fleet later, by the way. But yes,
we will get into that.
We'll get into that.
So yeah, I'm just double checking the notes. Yeah, 2 days before. So this defect was sat there for at least 2 days before, and that becomes damning at that point. So if you want to skip on.
So we have a flow chart of some kind.
There is a flow chart.
Here we go.
So for whatever reason, and I wasn't part of the project team at that point, and the delivery team at that point. For whatever reason, the French company wasn't proceeded with, but another small SME, shout out to what was Omnicom.
What was Omnicom, then swallowed by Balfour Beatty. Yeah, that's it. And now also more shenanigans since, I believe, as well. But
I think so, yeah.
Shout out to Sterling Kimrican and others.
Steve and Zoe and Mitch and the other wonderful people. They're genuinely very small business at the time. You were made to feel like family working with them. They were lovely people. So, they got the contract to develop basically a track inspection system, and they called it plain line pattern recognition. So it is their IP. And this flowchart is, how does it work? Well, you have the capture on the left all the way through delivering an end product to a section manager, to a track section manager. So this is the process of wheels turn on the train at the far left, all the way to the track section manager gets an inspected piece of track report at the end of it.
Yeah.
So we'll go through the next few slides, like what does that look like? Because this was important for me, briefing people, teaching people how to use it. But these are some really high level statements for a lot of technology pieces in these, like capture image, 2 words that were a lot of pain in getting to a reliable, repeatable, usable point for the guys in Omnicom and ourselves on the project team. positioning, the tales I can tell you about, some of the fun with like positioning data and things like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of complexity in what is quite a basic, straightforward visual.
Yeah, and I think actually I want to pick out a couple of things here that I think will kind of come back, will pop up again as we talk about, kind of tell this story and weave this narrative for us. Firstly, as you say, this little button here that says capture image, that obviously covers an enormous amount. I'm thinking forwards to AI hype men who claim that AI will solve everything, and there is a useful lesson in tonight's episode on a lot of that. Firstly, the process of capturing the image, that just capturing the image is challenging because, that's a real world thing involving mud, lens, lighting, where the camera goes. Is it getting walloped by things? How can you maintain X, Y, 100 things there? Geometry data, position data, how are those being tied to it? Those are all questions that just plugging it into Claude isn't going to solve. Those are material things that have to be correct, that you cannot just put into a neural net and hope for the best. Those are things that require technology, software, hardware, all to be coordinated. The real-time positioning system, which is was the real-time positioning system also an Omnicom technology?
Yeah, I believe so.
That was their technology as well, which people might have had the Omnicom app for a while. I still have it on my phone, actually, somehow, even though I think it's not on the App Store anymore. I don't know how that works. But that gives you a position. Anyone can download it, I think, still. Well, it is out there. I think they've just stopped supporting it. Gives you a position on the railway. If you stand near a railway, it'll give you the nearest position in miles and chains. Or miles and yards. Very useful. That technology tied into this. So then the next bit of AI will fix this is then you've got to validate the data. You've got to then get the data processed appropriately.
Yep.
Critically, then you have to get that data into a form that is useful for it to be audited, disseminated, and responded to. And again, none of those are things that AI can fix. Those are all ergonomics questions. They are management questions, process questions, all these things. So in terms of the bit that's like, well, a neural net can fix this, or a AI can magically fix this, AI magically fixing this fits into quite a small part of the process. Bearing in mind what people often are referring to with that are machine learning, and this is what we're going to go through is a fantastic example of the best use of machine learning, like a brilliant use of machine learning. But that's only one small part of the picture. The whole thing is a massive ergonomics, human factors, management, hardware software relationship type situation, integration of different softwares, integration of different X, Y, Z. And I just wanted to dwell on that point a little bit to just emphasize it.
There's two helpful boxes I've drawn here, very crudely.
Yeah.
In the, I don't know, is it brownie orange, it says originally on train, because with a hindsight, we decided to do all of this on a moving vehicle. Right? So in your sort of later videos, you won't see all of this bit, because by sort of late 2012, midway through 2013, we'd realized that it's really hard to get the kind of IT equipment that you need, the kind of servers, processing rigs, the racks full of kit to operate nicely in a moving train. That's like when you talk about, and I talk to people about project complexity and change complexity, that is a layer of complexity that we had given ourselves that we didn't need. And it was genuinely difficult. You've got the inspection trains run off diesel gensets, so they're not powered by the 25,000 volt overhead. They're not powered by 650 DC. They are run off diesel gensets because there's a lot of the UK, and we can argue about wires. I'm completely on board the let's just put wires everywhere train. You need the flexibility, so you have to run off diesel gensets. So all of a sudden, when that diesel genset has to stop for maintenance, and you're trying to do your track inspection,
you've lost your
UPS is screaming at you, and you're going, oh right, I now need to stop patrolling because someone needs to turn the genset off to service it. Like this bit was a real painful piece of learning for us. So in the green box, we went, let's capture with the yellow trains and then do all of the processing and hard work in dedicated suites.
Yeah.
So those are in Derby, the centre of the railway universe.
Beautiful sunny Barbados. Yeah.
Yeah. And there is some really expensive kit, obviously by today's hardware prices. Some really expensive kit that chews through that data in a much happier climate-controlled environment with, you know, a nice grid power supply. And
you can also be more responsive on hardware replacement as well if it's not on the train. Like
you can chase it around.
You've got to chase it around, and you can kind of use more off the shelf. You know, much more of your hardware can be off the shelf.
We were into some really expensive ruggedized kit, like, you know, the stuff that people sell to the armed forces because you can try and blow it up is the level we were at because of the temperatures and how 125 mile an hour that IT equipment is getting battered around. It's you know, the noises and the amount of times we had to try and stop things from moving because the racks are full to burst because you're trying to crunch all this data. So
So
that's what happened. So
what does the actual hardware, the front end hardware look like? Well, here's some pictures to explain.
This is it, right? So this is the capture side, and this is just the PLPR capture side. And these images have been used for a long time now. So they're under the NMT. You can see there. So it's under the Mark III coach on the left, and the one at the bottom, and the one on the right is a Mark II coach. That'll be your PLPR 1, 2, 3, and 4. These cameras are what do the hard work. So you will see there is a long slit, and that is your LED light, because you need to, for image quality, provide your own light source. You're underneath a moving train, which is why you get that when you see it running along. And a lot of people you'll see on, like, if you're part of a social media group for a local community, what was that blue light on the railway? Well, that's the one looking at the overheads. You have to provide your own lighting to get the image quality. So there'll be a blue light running along the ridge. That's track inspection or overhead line inspection. So we've got our own lighting array. The one that looks a little bit like a CCTV camera with like a porthole on it, that was thermal imaging. And then the ones that you can't really see that are the armored slits kind of behind it, the actual pointing down at the track cameras. So that long one there is the light.
Okay, that's the light, and then there's some slits that are kind of over
here. So those are the cameras tucked in. Helpfully with the world's smallest gaps, because we are taking 1 pixel wide images, and they're really expensive cameras, and you do not want ballast flicking up to hit them. So trying to keep them clean with my fat hands is very difficult. So before a shift, you're there with a blue roll and the lens cleaner spray, trying to desperately clean the lenses for your shift. That's the recording hardware side of it.
So and then there's a little bit of a diagram here to kind of explain what's going on.
So this is the full array. So you have a center camera looking at the forefoot between the rails, and then you have 3 cameras looking at each rail. So the inspector has not just a top-down view, but he can look into the foot and the web of the rail. Really useful for foot cracking, really useful for clamps, stuff like that.
Yeah, the inspector they will get they get a really good view, and we'll show some of the pictures in a minute. Gareth in the chat. Actually, Alex, you've been in the chat with Gareth before. Gareth in the chat. Yeah, hopefully this answers your question. This diagram, it gives you an idea of where all the cameras are facing, which is there is an array of them, giving that widespread. So that's the array. Here is so brief before we're going to get some different pictures of what you see. Firstly, Alex is laughing because there is this picture, which I've seen this picture a million times. This is a picture of, well, they're not that rare, but the fairly rare, bizarre bit of P-Way history. Go back to one of the episodes we did on track materials, some SHC clips here. The post-Pandrel weird, anyway, that's in a whole other story. But there are there's some edge pickup here and some funny lines, and this is enter the machine learning. So enter the pattern recognition part of, you've now got screeds, indeed terabytes of image data a day. Well, what do you do with that? Because a human isn't checking it. So this is the key part. So Alex, tell us about the pattern recognition element and the machine learning process that went into this.
Sure. So one of my predecessors on the program had the unthankful task of chopping the UK up into patrols. We call them patrols, the same as a foot patrol, right? You use the same language. So the unthankful task of chopping the UK up into thousands and thousands of patrols so that we could section the images. And then you take those sections of images, take all 7 cameras, and you run it through this, which is your pattern recognition. So the pattern recognition was taught with models what good looks like. So you are looking for these models, and the reference was the running band on the rail. So it's looking for a running band in the image, going, oh right, that's where my rail is, because it's a continuous running band. And then it's looking for, the clear edge of the sleeper, and then it's narrowing down and going, right, there should be a fastening in this location. Does this match any of my library of acceptable fastenings? If it doesn't, ping missing fastening. And then that will get into the business rules. And your business rules are, one fastening out of thousands is nothing. As a percentage failure, it's nothing. Two together, that starts to get a little bit more interesting. So network rail stack their business rules on top. So the system says, right, here's all the missing fastenings, here's all the clamps.
These are the standards, your 001 type standards. All those,
you apply your business rules over the top. Yeah. But this image has haunted us. This was one of the better images of pattern recognition working. For some reason, it's one that Omnicom really liked. And we were like, SHCs aren't used anywhere. Yeah. And there'll be some angry guys in Anglia or Western telling me they definitely still are. But, they got taken out. They have some weird failure modes, and, the toe load isn't great. So this is a very niche fastening, and this image followed us everywhere.
Yeah, but it's useful because it allows us to talk about this. So this, by the way, again, if you've got AI boosters going, isn't AI wonderful? This stuff is amazing, unique. A reminder that we've been doing this type of technology. This is 20 years old, and it was by no means, this is cutting edge for the railways globally, but it was by no means the first application of this type of technology, either. So this is 20 years old. So there's a couple of good questions coming in, and I'm sure we're going to pick up on validation. But the key question, Andy 24242 rightly asking, what are the false negative and false positive rates? And that comes back, in a way, that leads into my next point, which I can ask you, which is the process of validating this.
Yeah. Sure. Do we cover, is it in the next image? Do we have some inspection in the next image?
We will have some inspection recorded stuff. We can pick it up later if you like, if you want to go through.
Yeah, just to quickly for the guys in chat, the false positive rate was not great. To start, because you're developing a piece of technology, but over time so we used to not only inspect, but you'd push back to the developer team and say, hey, look, we're getting loads of false positives, you might want to take a look at this particular inspection, it's particularly awful, and they go away and go, oh right, yeah, the sun was in this position, so the lighting's slightly different, so we now need a new set of models. So embankments, when we first started, west coast to south embankments, because the train was quite high up in the low sunlight in the winter, used to really make their algorithms go crazy, and then you build another set of models because you've captured the images already.
Yes.
So you just cut models with the correct fastenings out and go, right, now test for these. Wet weather. First wet inspection. Horrible, but build wet weather models. You go away, you build wet weather models, and you go, right, now it knows what it's looking for. Same with snow. You have a library you're creating and improving over time, so your false positives get driven down over time. So the more you encounter them, and the more you develop around it and go, right, we need to build models for this.
So the next question, I suppose, is, and we'll get into some of the inspection records. I'm just jumping into a little segment that I've added through. We'll come back to some of the inspection records and that process, that flow diagram earlier. But I thought let's talk about what's on the train. What's that experience like? Here's me, 7 years ago, me sitting, taking a little video as we're kind of rolling through. This is one of the Mark II coaches that doesn't have anything much going on in it. It's like this is just hot desks basically. But you'll see in a minute what the actual desk of the crew operating looks like. First, though, let's see what I have to say. Behind me, you can see the team working away. We're inside the PLPR train, so they're keeping an eye on all the data feeds coming through, the various traces. Next to me here, if I walk through, you can see various bits of server kit. Down there is the array of hard drives that stores all the imagery from the PLPR system. Lots of different things. You've got the real-time positioning system that very accurately records where exactly we are on rail infrastructure, so that all that data gets pinned geographically and is actually useful for the track maintenance teams and the other teams who use the data. All sorts of stuff. Now, look at all this stuff. It's like being in it's like Star Trek, but in a Mark II coach. It's quite fun. All this kit pumps out a huge amount of heat, and we're not in a specialised server room, so the heat doesn't get dissipated easily. And they've got some aircon. There's kind of the old aircon in here, and they've fitted an extra aircon unit. But there's dust flying around. It's kind of quite, it can be quite dirty. The heat in here can be intense. So the kit really gets pushed through its paces more than you'd expect, a server room in an office or something like that. So they go, some of the kit, it gets pushed pretty hard. So Alex, there's some videos which will just loop of showing some of the stuff here. So I really want to talk through what's on the screen, and it's going to loop a few times, so you get to...
So you're 2019, so you've got capture. So those there are the disks that it gets written to. And for the data nerds, we were writing, I think, 14 terabytes every 260 miles. So our 24,000 mile network, you can work out how much data we're capturing. It was a lot. And this is when, bear in mind, that's 2012, 2013, a terabyte SSD was like, that's pretty fancy. And we had, no joke, must have been over 100 of them in Peli cases, because once they're written, you have to stop recording, pull them out, or hot swap them if the train's pausing for sort of 5 minutes. It was one of the things you got down to a fine art of just like quickly stopping everything, pulling the discs out, putting fresh discs in, get it all up and running again. You've got the light controls because the LED array is super bright, so you've got a load of controls for that.
So this is another sort of video now showing some wires at the moment.
It was funny you mentioned the temperature. Grim at times in the summer. If your aircon packed up and you are doing 125 mile an hour down the east coast, it's warm. I'll bet. So in terms of the screens that the team see, this is exactly, and there's a few of the cameras off in this one, but you'll see all of them on in a minute. This is some of the traces. So you can see over here some of the imagery that's popping up. So they indicate by KVM here. What does KVM stand for, actually? Keyboard, video, mouse. So from one keyboard and mouse, you can control multiple PC systems.
I see. Okay.
So there's a series of hotkeys for you to switch different PCs you want to control. So that you've circled there is your live feed from your cameras.
Yes. So that's showing all. You can see all. People will see what those images look like in a minute. So you've got all those there. These are various other. I mean, this looks like it's LiDAR possibly on the
white above is your
so that's
RTGS
the map
feed.
So that's showing you. You can see where the train is. You can see there's a junction going up there and there. You can see mileposts or whatever. You can see
and you're keeping an eye on that. To make sure you're going where you're supposed to be going. You've got a radio for the driver if it's like, mate, we're off route. Stick to the timings, please. And then the ones below are the readouts from the laser profile system. So you can actually make out a joint on the lower right hand side one. You see the running band. There's like a little bit above. You can see the fastings, but there's a joint there, like an IBJ.
It's quite compressed. I was thinking those are joints, but no, I see what you mean. It's kind of quite squashed in this dimension. You can see the running band very nicely.
That's your live feed just to check it's working. So you have these sit here and you are effectively there to kick it off, make sure it's all working properly.
There's the images with all the screens on and showing all the data. So in full swing here with the two chaps.
And those two guys, their job is to basically act as first line tech support for the duration of that shift. So you're there to kick all the recordings off. You're there to make notes about anything, any off routes on shift, anything that breaks. You're on the phone straight away. You're, do you hit the mushroom of death and turn the whole coach off and start again? Like
I see the mushroom of death. It's here. The mushroom of death.
You're just, that's if things start going really, really badly and everything starts, throwing a wobbly. You can't stop the train, its path, it's running. So you have to make a quick call as to, do you lose a little bit of mileage, killing everything dead and restarting it, because everything has a boot cycle. So sometimes the quickest thing is like, right, we're going to lose the data, let's kill it, start it up again, and it'll kick off again. That reliability obviously improves over time, but things work loose, things rattle loose. It's the unfortunate nature of moving trains.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's not. There's a team. There's a wider supervisor. So I had a really good chat with the supervisor on shift. She was extremely. I mean, you saw her in the video earlier. She was extremely candid at explaining kind of what the experience is like. But she had a really good. I don't know where she's working within Network Rail, if indeed she's still within Network Rail now. But at the time, I suppose I'm trying to. She was Network Rail rather than Colas. But anyway, so there's a really passionate team. They really get this. They really, and Alex will show everyone what you were up to at the time momentarily, but there's a really passionate team running these trains, and they get how important this thing is. They get that this is an absolutely key piece of safety critical kit. It's brilliant. Talking of the teams on the trains, who's this?
Yeah, this is me. This is the back of my head, talking to Robin Gisby and Tim Flowers, the program manager at the time, right? So yeah, people remember Robin Gisby. There you go, and that's me. Effectively babysitting my PLPR recording, making sure everything's happening. You can see route maps in the in trays, so if you need to refer to where you are, if things start going a bit weird, you're like, digging the atlases out, going, where's he gone now?
Also default XP backgrounds as well, which is very nice.
Yeah, of course. Well, it's what was this, 2012? Everything's still on XP then.
Has it? That's a good point. For security reasons, you don't have to answer this. But people pointing out that support for XP ended in 2009. So
yeah, very valid.
Cybersecurity
how
experts,
are you going to hack my air-gapped moving train?
Well, yeah, but yeah. Well, let's see. Anyway, so let's talk about the outputs now, because there's quite a bit of stuff to get through here. We'll canter through this, but
there's a lot.
There's get a chance for people to see what the user interface looks like when that information starts getting processed. So, Alex, talk us through these and kick me when you want me to move on.
Yeah, I threw quite a few in here, so feel free. But I wanted to throw this in for the kind of detail. So you're looking at the text on top of the insulating piece of a fast clip there, and that is recorded at 125 mile an hour. Yeah. So that's the kind of detail you are looking at.
Ingredients on a crisp packet at 125 miles. Yeah, 70,000 shots a second.
Yeah, if we found something, let's say, interesting, it would be screenshot in full HD and send someone saying, you left this behind. And that's the kind of, you can have a bit of fun with that. But this is the kind of detail, and the system is presenting, saying, not happy with this, not happy with this. You need to go and look at this. And then a competent inspector is then doing that track inspection. So if you flick on, there should be one with the track geometry trace.
Yeah, there it is. That's the trace. Right? Yep.
So train has run, discs have come off, thrown into the service system. Indexed into patrol, said, I want to look at, patrol 12, crunches all the data, and is now only showing you by exception what it wants you to look at. So you're not inspecting a 30, 40 mile stretch. You're looking at only the things the system is unhappy with that don't meet the modeling. Yeah. And you're going through and you're, going to that defect, and you have to look 3 or 4 sleepers either side just to check, just because, positioning can be slightly off, but it's, you're not looking at very far. For that, you're looking at a dip angle. I can see a dip there that's gone. 3rd and 4th channel down on the top.
Yeah, you can see the dip angles left and right, and a bit more dip on the left-hand side than the right-hand side.
Yeah, but you can see as an inspector, so to report this, I would probably, because you would select the image you wanted to send to the section manager, and I'd be showing him the ballast attrition that's starting to form, right? So you can see the light-coloured ballast on the left-hand side of the screen there, and you're going, oh, right, mate, this is where the dip is. So he gets the GPS reference because, hey, PLPR introduced GPS for faults, and that was a good thing. Yep. And you're sending that to them, and they now know what to look for when they go out on site. So they're looking for that ballast attrition.
Yeah. Matt Vol asks, what's the weirdest thing you found on cameras? There's a smirk from Alex there.
Carefully say this in what is supposed to be a PG-ish show. Marital aids, I think, is the
marital aids. Okay, yeah.
I had to think that.
Comedy GTA San Andreas dildo. Yeah, okay, noted. Yeah, right. All sorts is found.
People throw all sorts on the railway. It's a thing.
It's funny. If it's being chucked around, we will spot it. But Doug, thanks, by the way, for Doug Pauly saying, very, very good friend of the show, saying, I would absolutely love to travel on this train. It would be fun. I mean, they're Mark IIs, Doug, so it's completely bloody useless from an accessibility perspective. But it would be interesting. Yeah, it is interesting riding on the train. Definitely is. Yeah. It's one of the things that would be interesting from the spec. We'll get to it at the end. I'm conscious of time. It'd be interesting to know if making this a more accessible workspace would involve procuring a train that's actually accessible, because it's a thing that we can and should do, actually, as a railway, is think about our workforce and widening the ability, because there's nothing stopping someone in a wheelchair being able to do this work on the train other than the fact that it's a Mark II and you can't get on and off it easily.
Yeah, so the challenge is having to get down to the track side, right? Yeah. So you have to be able to get yourself up to the sole plate. Because when everything goes real bad, you have to stop the train, check for damage. Like if things start making a weird noise, you're the one that's getting out, not the driver. He will stop it and tell you, like, you need to get out this side. I've got a possession of the line adjacent. Can you go and check over? So if you can't get yourself on and off the train,
that becomes
that's the challenge.
Let's keep do my clicking and so more pictures again. You're seeing, well, firstly there's some nice wet track in the first one.
Track.
You're just seeing a really nice set of very high resolution. You're getting an idea of the resolution here. Like the quality of the images is spectacular. Again, 20-year-old system.
Broken rail at the top. Gone well, not supposed to look like that. Broken IBJ is the one below, and that's the kind of detail, right? As a local section, being able to send you that image in high res and go, this is either broken or some silicon, and probably broken. Can you go and look at it? Is a lot better than looking for a needle in a haystack. Absolutely.
Yeah, you can see the crack clean as day there. That's very nice, and that's been picked up and flagged by the system. That's like there shouldn't be a line there. That should be a clean set of pixels. There is a line flagged. So it's really, really good. And here is a nice clamped, something that's been clamped here.
A weld has been clamped. Looking at the bulge clamps, but your top two are loose. So again, you're looking at that going, actually the third one doesn't look great either. That's loose too. So you're sending this out to a local section, going, got loose clamp here, mate.
Go and fix it. Sort it out.
Please tighten it up. Yeah.
And again, this is meaning that if people are on track, they're on track because there is no other way to do that work. You have to have a person go out there and do the work. And it's a far better use of people. It's a far better use of risky time, as in people being exposed to not just exposed to the elements out on the operational rail, which is a bit of a grim experience anyway, but also the risks from moving trains. Even as we move into an entirely non-red zone kind of working situation.
When we would send you the images and we send you a GPS, so you know where you're going, right? That set of clamps might be one of several in a section if there's a renewal going on, so you know exactly which one you're going to.
Yeah. So here's another. That's an absolutely obliterated sleeper here, which is very nice. That's
probably
that's gone.
Treated to that by a Tampa, I suspect.
That's RIP this F-27. Yeah, that's done.
It's a bad time.
Yeah, crikey. But again, everyone's getting an idea of what the imagery looks like. It's really nice. So here's one of the TEF 3226. So the track engineering form 3226.
When we first started, I used to upset people and call it a 1990s solution to an 1800s problem, right? So we would send you a PDF with your images on that you could obviously, you're on a machine, you can scroll and zoom in, and they were HD images, but we would send you a PDF of your inspection, which was still a significant improvement over a wet, soggy piece of A4 from your track patroller that went out last time. And I'm giving you the GPS location, I'm giving you engineers' line references, I'm giving you mileages, and you have a picture. So you've not had to send anyone out. You can look at these and go, oh yeah, that really is defective. I better go and do something about that.
Yeah, and it's still very and we'll maybe talk a bit about some of the advances since then, and we'll also perhaps talk about other technologies that are doing a very similar thing that are at the moment being deployed on a more devolved basis that sort of duplicate in parallel some of this, but in different ways that are in some ways that are quite interesting. But this is, as the railway moves, some stuff jumps forward and other stuff you have to pull along with you, and how the information disseminates is an example of that.
I think this has gone digital now, but this is where we're at when I left it. Was you get the reports, you get them in different grades with different categories of faults on. Please go and look at this and action it accordingly. That's it. The system's now done. Yeah. It's gone through. The train's run. The team in Derby have inspected it. This is now with you, track section manager. Please can you go and deal with this as you see fit.
Yeah. GHF YouTube, why did you get rid of just people's normal names? How long typically would it take? This is a track one I can answer. How long typically would it take for the crack in the joint shown a couple of slides ago to develop into a failure that could cause an accident? How long's a piece of string? Depends on your tonnage. Depends on your traffic levels. So on a quiet line, that could be in there for a while. But on the West Coast main line, that could be like morning to an hour, or that could be like
bad time.
Yeah, a few heavy, one heavy freight train could obliterate it. Yeah. So yes, and the results then. So the results of this, like the big picture results, that's the outputs. But this is where a chance to talk about how transformative this has been and what that looks like on a kind of nationwide basis.
Absolutely. So there's obviously operational targets. Everyone's got key performance indicators, right? It's 20. It's the late 20 teens. Everyone loves a KPI. So you have what track has been inspected by PLPR in the last 4 weeks, and that is green section. What's gone 4 to 8 weeks, and and that would trigger the local section looking at their go live paperwork and looking at, I've got a long timber bridge in that section. I've got a known wet bed site. So they might do spot inspection because the PLPR train hasn't been through in the last 4 weeks, but they're generally, you're using the local team to go, how much of this do you let ride and how much of this do you go back out on the track, all the way through to the stuff that's greater than 13 weeks that, we can't seem to hit it. That is trigger your boots on ballast, go back to the Victorian method.
Yeah.
So there was a big push, and actually you can see there's a big chunk there that is, done in the last 8 weeks, inspected, warts and all, massive detail. And this is where we got to. Was just, and this is again a very old image. So
yeah, don't go and judge the routes now. It's interesting to look at the southeast and looking at southeast quite far behind relative to others. It's interesting, difficult, complex part of the country.
Yeah, really. Just in terms of you're trying to get an engineering train on. Hard. It's really hard. It's busy.
Yeah. And then the last thing, I suppose, is some data.
Here is some data, right? But the one thing I wanted to call out was devolution. So you see a nice line here where I was ticking up the implementation mileage with the team, and then devolution happens and everything stops because people are going, do we want to do this? We've now masters of our own destiny, whereas before we were a national project. So when people talk about devolution and, tying things together, when you do big national things like PLPR, it makes it really hard.
Yeah. High output, for example, another thing that devolution killed, much to the serious downside for the whole railway network. Yeah, not great. The devolution had some. I don't know. I feel like I'm not a huge fan of the way Network Rail was devolved and the impacts of it. I think the wrong lines were drawn in the wrong places, and I don't see a materially useful output. My view, not the view of my employer or of Alex's organisation. But a high output, the death of high output, I think was probably the biggest serious negative outcome. I mean, you still have a high output, but the volumes that high output kick out are substantially lower now, and that team has been largely disbanded and sent to the Four Winds. So, before we come back and kind of close this section out, I wanted to do a couple of things. Firstly, remind everyone about the bonus, because tonight's bonus, there's a very interesting letter was sent, a letter sent by the Department of Transport on behalf of kind of the future idea of what GBR will look like versus ScotRail. So it's kind of saying where GBR and ScotRail relate to each other, and it's extremely interesting. So we're going to be looking through that in a lot of detail. It's funny, Gareth's asking about devolution. Devolution in the context of Network Rail was going from a largely centralised organisation with kind of bits of route that did certain things to a much more devolved, decentralised structure with more autonomy given out to the kind of various bits of the country. The 14 routes and regions in total. It was a Haynes initiative, and it caused problems. It caused quite a lot of problems. Anyway, so that's the bonus tonight. GBR versus ScotRail. We must next go. Alex, you join us for the news, because there's some interesting bits of news I wanted to pick up. The first of these is there's been very recently a trademark placed, and I'm puzzled about this trademark because this is not the new Rail Symbol 2. This is Rail Symbol 1 that has been trademarked. As you can see by me overlaying Rail Symbol 2 onto the image. So I'm puzzled by this. I don't know why this has been re-trademarked. What's interesting, though, is the colours that the trademark has applied with. These are the colours in the range, which is also very strange. There's some nerd out there will tell me why these colours have been chosen. It might be nothing to do with the intent of a brand, but these colours, these choice of colours seem interesting to me. So keep your eyes peeled on what that might mean for the future. I'm interested by this. Anyway, so branding. Some more news, which is, of course, the end of the beginning of the end continuing for all of us. Off the back of last week's episode, where we were talking about the fact that we were being told to, work from home, drive less, fly less, so on and so on. The EU Energy Commissioner has said that the oil crisis triggered by the US and Israeli attack on Iran will bring substantially lengthy upheaval, kind of in a bit of a COVID pandemic-y type vibe speech. Politico picking this one up, which is interesting. particularly interesting thing for transport in the UK is that we are Europe's most vulnerable market to jet fuel disruption, says Michael O'Leary, the Ryanair CEO. And the most interesting factor in that is we have just received our last tanker of jet fuel this week. Like, it's arrived now. That's the last of our jet fuel in the UK right now, which is interesting. What will that mean for the aviation industry? Well, irrelevant, because government and Heathrow are pressing on with Heathrow expansion. So don't worry about that. Trebles all round, crack on. It's interesting, isn't it, that government's entire growth strategy, Alex, you do not have to answer this, government's entire growth strategy based around an aviation industry that might well have be in total disarray and collapse by the end of this year. Fascinating. Anyway, so that's all good fun. Some other kind of tied to that is a very interesting paper by Giulio Mattioli here, who has co-authored a paper with Ian Phillips, Gillian Annable, and Tim Chatterton on in the Journal of Transport Geography on the vulnerability to motor fuel price increases in the UK. Really interesting paper, some really interesting stuff. So I'm posting this because there's some good data in here. Possibly the most interesting part of this is, well, there are a couple of things, but one of the really interesting parts is finding out that in England, it's not really the case that the most deprived areas will suffer the most from fuel squeezes, because low income in the UK, a reminder, low income is correlated with lower car dependence because cars are expensive. So that means that generally you'll see that there are wealthy car dependent rural areas that are going to suffer more than those deprived inner cities that do still have better public transport and walkability. So it's an interesting one. Of course, air pollution being inflicted on those areas is kind of another question and story, but I found that particularly interesting. Ian Visits, always worth popping in and catching up with Ian Visits. Ian Visits has reported on something that I think is quite interesting, which is an underground car park opening in the City of London for cycle couriers. It's a cycle hub designed for cycle couriers and for kind of urban logistics micromobility. This is great. I like this. This is a really positive thing to see happen. So I'm really pleased about this. Cycle couriers are the answer to a lot of urban logistics problems, actually. And so the more we do to make their lives, often they're on 0 hours contracts, pretty grim working conditions. The more we do to make their lives easier and more pleasant and comfortable, the better, frankly. If you want your treats delivered tomorrow, then treat these people well. Right, and that's a bit of news. So as I hopped off the PLPR train back in September 2019 and it disappeared off into the distance, it is a chance for us to kind of do a little bit of closing out, I suppose. There it goes. Look at it go. There. Anyway, me in Willington Station. Alex, the question then is really, what's next for PLPR? What's happening? And I suppose,
it's a good question. It's a good question.
Before we talk about it, and then talk. So there's a couple of things you might want to do. You might want to talk about what PLPR achieved, which we'll do in a minute. But also, I wanted to sort of say, the kind of the what's next piece, which is sort of mounting, this technology being mounted on in-service trains rather than a dedicated fleet is one. Well, perhaps not the next. We'll talk about it. This technology, perhaps not PLPR, but some of the paralleling technologies. One of which being One Big Circle, have technology that is doing a very similar thing at the moment, which is interesting, happening at the same time as PLPR2 is being bid, but we'll talk about that. Hello to the person who was literally in a meeting about that earlier, by the way, who was in the chat. Hello, Lachlan, I think it was. But One Big Circle and Aver are doing this, and they're doing some interesting things, I think, with the technology and the way it's being managed on a route basis. Again, consequence of devolution that it's happening somewhere, but anyway, another story. And I suppose really, before we both go next to each other and chat about these things, it's about what is the future for the Yellow Fleet, including PLPR. So, Alex, firstly, before we talk, let's talk about the future PLPR, and then we can come back to what PLPR has actually achieved. So, yeah, tell me about the future PLPR.
Sure. I mean, there's always pressure on the team in Derby that collect the data. They always get a bit of a leaning on, can you do this off passenger vehicles? and it's always looked at. It's always, conversations are had, people do test pieces, things like that. Repeatability is a real challenge, and control of where that train goes, right? So with the yellow engineering trains, you plan those in, you're organising that, you're crewing that, and you're deciding what gets inspected and what gets recorded when. When it's on a passenger train, it might be on an A to B run all day, just shuttling backwards and forwards. Once you capture that data once, do you need to see it 6 times for a single day? So interesting to get stuff off passenger trains. I think there's value in it, but I think you'd always want a dedicated fleet.
Yep.
And I think other data streams will dictate that. So ultrasonic testing probably dictates you're going to have to run a dedicated fleet.
Yeah, you can't. Ultrasonic testing requires a funny little squidgy wheel to be attached to the. You're not attaching a funny little squidgy wheel and all the associated hardware to a passenger train. It's just not happening.
Yeah, there's another hour of getting nerdy about engineering talking about ultrasonic testing, right? So I think that dictates that you're probably going to need a dedicated fleet. I think improvements on camera quality. I would expect stuff like that to come through. Improvements in positioning data, modeling, self-learning, let's say.
Because we're now at the point where the process for you retraining the model previously was much slower. That machine learning process was much slower. Now, with the approach that you can have with neural nets, with what is often termed AI in a way that's different, like the algorithms of machine learning then versus how you would approach machine learning now are different. And that gives you a bit more leanness, I think. It gives you a more rapid training in theory.
Absolutely. Where else do I think it would go? Sweating the asset, I think, is probably a big one for me, right? So you have this imagery. What other departments could make use of it? Do you use it for just asset counting? So what locations have you got joints, what locations, where's your S&C digitally? People like Internet of Things, people like models and stuff like that, but you have all that raw data being collected. So
as a design engineer, I would have loved to have access to PLPR because it would have allowed me to do a full detailed walkout inspection without being out walking out. Don't get me wrong, design engineers should always walk their site before they do a design. It doesn't take us much to do that. It's not high risk. You go out and do it at night, fine. But having the ability to refer back to very high quality data would be extremely powerful. I'm just thinking of how good VisiV, the kind of the route view imagery from above has been, how useful it is to have cab video. That stuff combined with this high quality data would be very, very valuable.
To overlay that as well, so if you could data line both streams, you could actually see, forward facing and down facing at the same time, look at the same location, that kind of stuff.
So, So, Alex, the thing I wanted to end on, which I think was your second slide in your kind of notes that you sent over, is what has PLPR achieved? If we've talked about the future, but actually, I want to end on a bit of a retrospective. What was achieved by this? We've had 20 years plus of PLPR. What's it achieved?
Yeah, I mean, I think. The big thing to say is that the UK we were getting international visitors as we were doing this, right? So we, as Network Rail and Omnicom and the people involved, had pushed this pretty hard. There are a lot of people that put a lot of long time and a lot of long hours and a lot of themselves into this. And we managed to remove boots off ballast on a lot of plain line track. So that is less putting staff in front of moving trains, because a lot of it was done red zone, which is where people are out inspecting with moving traffic. So you're then using your skilled staff to look at the stuff that isn't easily repeatable. So you're then looking at targeted inspections. You're then looking at switching and crossings. You're then looking at that weird timber thing that was built a very long time ago.
Yes.
Can you go and look at my wraps? Can you go and look at my level crossings? Give me confidence on these things, because the train does all of the boring stuff.
Yep.
So, it moved to that. It created a bow wave of faults, so it drove up track asset condition massively, because the train turns up and goes, hey, your previous inspectors were lovely people, but here is a list in black and white with evidence that your track is not the condition you think it is. So it did drive up asset quality. We did see over time, track condition, people managing their ballast better. Like it was a massive step forward, and it's a big thumbs up in terms of like, yes, this was painful. Yes, this was difficult. But wow, it's a huge move on from the man walking the track.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just an enormous. It's spectacular. The impact that PLPR as a technology has had on the railway probably can't really be overstated. It is massive, and it's part of a series of things that were changing at the same time. Yeah. But PLPR is very much one of the absolute core elements of those changes. Alex, you've done such a good job of guiding us through that. Thank you so much. We'll come back to Alex just before we go. So if you've got any quick questions, everyone, now's the time to line them up before I do a little bit of talking about of me going, everyone subscribe, please, and tell everyone else to subscribe. And also, hello, Jen on the move. Lovely to see you here. But everyone subscribe, because we've gone from 15,000-ish to now 16,354. We're getting there. Our target, 25,000 by the end of the year, question mark, is still... We're a bit off, but if we accelerate, we can make it. We've got 8,500 left to go. Let's do this. Let's go. Let's go. The more people subscribe, the more people get to see this in the algorithm, and the more people, therefore, get to enjoy learning about PLPR with Alex and I. So let's make that happen. It's been a delight. Alex, it's been a real delight to have you on to talk. We talked about this for a little while, bouncing around. I'm really glad we've got this done. Happy April Fools to everyone who celebrates, but there's nothing April Foolsy about this episode. This is all for reals. Alex, in terms of questions, how quickly and easily can a single... Oh, there's a few technical... P-Way questions, take that to the Discord and at me. I can answer those. There's people asking about using the cameras to... I suppose this is talking about Gaussian splats and photogrammetry. Could you use the cameras to make a 3D image? To which I suppose you don't need to, because you've got a LiDAR tool that gives you a profile. You've got a laser that actually gives you a profile of the rail, which is used for things like checking head profiles, making sure that it's not beyond limits.
Fast clip failures. Fast clips twist. So one side of the housing breaks and the laser picks up that the fastening's twisted. It's that kind of thing. On top down, it's hard to see. You need the laser.
Yeah. So actually, there is a combination of 3D. Andy24242, good question. There is a combination of 3D technologies, and I suppose, could you use the high resolution imagery to create a photogrammetric, a 3D model of the track? You could. I suppose the answer would be, given that would be an enormous data set, how would that be useful? It would be fun, sure, but it's like, would that be a useful exercise? Yeah, it's always interesting. A lot of this is this is one of those situations where this is a challenge that is being resolved with a technology, a solution that is providing a technology. It's not a technology looking for a problem. It is a problem that technologies come in and resolve. And I think that's a key part of, if we're going to end on a lesson, Alex, for me, that's it. It's the problem should lead the solution, not the other way around. And something that the tech industry could learn a lot from. Alex, anything you want to end on before we give our Cheerios, other than me saying thank you very much indeed?
No, just big shout out to everyone that worked on it. It was a big project.
Yeah, massive, fantastic. Alex, look, thank you so much. Remember, everyone, come and join us for the bonus. And if you've got any questions that weren't picked up, come and join us for the bonus so we can cover those. Alex and I will bid you all farewell. Alex, thank you so much, everyone. Cheerio, and have a very good night. Cheerio, cheerio, cheerio.